Welcome back to Dash Explorer. Today, I'm going to be jumping into the topic of packing by sharing our experiences of packing for 2 adults and 2 children under the age of 4 for a week-long trip in Europe. With that being said, I will mostly be focusing on the flying aspect of packing, as well as the lack of car for transportation as we go from place to place throughout Europe. So packing for this trip was hands down the most stressful part for me. I lost so much sleep, I spent hours making lists, I practiced packing, and because you're lucky, I recorded videos in real time so you can see all of my practice packing and just genuine stress sprinkled throughout this video, so you're welcome. But I just didn't know how we were gonna do it. We are 2 adults with 2 children, and we weren't going to have a car to take us places. We occasionally took a couple ride-sharing services, but mostly we were taking trains and we were walking. So we physically needed to be able to carry all of our belongings, as well as wrangle and manage our 2 children. Needless to say, there was a lot we needed to think about and a lot to overwhelm me, but if I can survive, then you can survive too. So here is how we packed for 2 adults and 2 children into 2 checked bags and 2.5 backpacks for our week-long trip in Europe. So I'm going to start by showing you the actual bags that we packed everything in for this trip, and then I will go into how I went about deciding what everybody would need for the trip. So the suitcases that we had at the time of this trip are the Away larger carry-on suitcases, which means that in America, they are carry-on bags. So not only did we go to Europe with just 2 suitcases, but they were 2 carry-on size suitcases. Although we technically couldn't carry them onto the plane because they are too big for the international flights, we had to really minimize the amount of stuff that we brought. But inside those suitcases were packing cubes. Now, I'm sure you've heard all about packing cubes, and maybe you have your own system that you use, and there's definitely a better system, I think, than what I used for our trip. But for this trip, everybody just had their own packing cube. Andrew and I each had one of the larger packing cubes, and the girls had one of the more medium-sized cubes. Now, Andrew ended up putting all of his clothes into his backpack, so it was just my clothes and the girls' clothes in our suitcases. But everybody had a packing cube, and it did make it easier for us to find whose clothes we were looking for every morning when we were going to get dressed. It did kind of get weird once we started having a lot more dirty clothes, but you're on vacation, it doesn't really matter. Just enjoy it, don't overthink that stuff. But between the 2 suitcases were all of the girls' clothes, including my own, and then there was also a ton of baby gear, and that's the toughest part about traveling with a child under the age of 1 or even under the age of 2 or 3 is there is stuff that you need that you don't necessarily want to buy new in a new country, and then what do you do with this extra thing that you're only going to use for this short amount of time? So we had to dedicate a big portion of our suitcases to this baby gear, but stay tuned for a future video about all the baby gear that we brought and whether or not I thought it was useful. So in addition to all of the clothes and the baby gear, we also had our extra shoes, extra diapers, and all of our winter gear shoved into our suitcases. You know, truly, as much as I tried to be organized for this trip, the actual inside of the suitcases was just chaos. At a certain point, I kind of knew where everything was, but it was just a game of Tetris of how to fit everything that I knew we needed into the bag so that we could get it from place to place. And then the other pieces of luggage that we had were our backpacks. So Andrew and I both have larger backpacks, which was really nice. Like I said, Andrew was able to fit all of his clothes, shoes, toiletries, things into his backpack. And then the other thing that we put in there was extra diapers. Any extra space we had, we shoved extra diapers and extra pull-ups in just to give us a little more time before we needed to find a place to buy diapers. So my backpack was more of a glorified oversized diaper bag. I had anything that the girls needed for the overnight trip, including toothbrushes, diapers and pull-ups, wipes, and then bottles for Delaney because she was still on bottles at the time. So I had a Ziploc bag of formula and a thing of dish soap to wash the bottles out in between uses. And then I also had snacks for Haley and us, so in case we needed anything on the plane, water bottles, just all the little stuff that we didn't put in our suitcase was in our bag. I also made sure that I had extra changes of clothes for both girls and a shirt for myself because all of my clothes were checked under the plane. So if there was any kind of accident, you know, we had 2 kids, I had at least a shirt that I could change into if I needed to. Also in my backpack, we had a tablet for Haley, which we ended up purchasing for her for this trip, and I am so glad that we did. It was such a lifesaver on all of the trains and planes and just those times where she needed to sit and decompress. We don't use it all the time with her at home, but it was a great tool for travel and something that was special for her that she got to use on this trip. I also had a couple other things to entertain the girls in my bag. I had some coloring stuff for Haley because I knew that could entertain her for hours, and it's also something that can pack down pretty small and wouldn't take up too much space in my bag. Now, Delaney, on the other hand, was still only 11 months old at the time of this trip, so she wasn't really into playing with toys and didn't really need much to entertain her. But I did bring some teething toys because she was getting some teeth in at the time, and just a couple other little, like, small baby dolls that she could hug because that's all she really needed to entertain her. And then our half backpack was at the last minute, we decided to let Haley bring a backpack where she would keep like her stuffed animal. We also ended up putting a lot of the winter gear in there, so the hats, gloves, scarves, things that weren't super heavy, but we did not trust her to have the tablet or anything that was expensive or worth anything. So she was able to carry some stuff too, because we just didn't have room for loveys and blankets and all of those things. And it was a huge help that she was big enough to be able to carry that stuff for us. So like I've already said, I tried to be really organized when it came to packing for this trip, but when it all comes down to it, it's just playing a game of Tetris and trying to fit all the things that you have into the luggage that you have. So, but for us, between the backpack and the suitcases, we had everything that we need. We didn't really forget anything major. And something that's really important for you to keep in mind is that wherever you are traveling in the world, there are going to be children there. Especially if you are going to a major city or a densely populated suburb, there are going to be children there. There are going to be stores or pharmacies or places that you can go and find anything that you might need for your child, whether that's formula, wipes, diapers, or extra clothes because you've stained something or ripped something, or extra layers because it's colder than you thought. Whatever you might need, you are probably going to be able to find it there. So if you watch my planning tools and resources video, if you haven't, I'll link it here. I talked a lot about how I love to have a planning notebook or a planning document where I can keep all of my information in one place. And one of the things that I mentioned that I use that notebook for is making packing lists. I am a huge fan of actually writing down or typing out everything that you want to pack. I think there's so much going on, and you as the adult are so overwhelmed with information of just everything that goes into a trip that by having a list that you are able to check off as you pack, but also reference to know what you do and don't have, or able to add things to as you think of things, I think it just kind of helps the mental chaos to funnel it all into one place and write it all down. So my 4 major categories for planning what I will be packing for my family on our trips are sleep needs, eating needs, clothing needs, and entertainment needs. And I will break down each of those categories, but by kind of funneling everything through those categories, I'm able to keep myself organized of what I need to pack, but also making sure I'm hitting their basic needs with those lists. The first category is sleep needs. Here you will write down all the things that you think your child will need to get through their bedtime routine. So anything like diapers and pull-ups, swaddles, sleep sacks, loveys or stuffed animals, whatever you think your child's gonna need, write that on this list. Now I want you to remember that you don't have to bring every single thing that you write down. This is just a place for you to brain dump all of the things that you might need so that you have it out there, and once it comes time to pack, you can pick the things that you really need and the things that you have space for. Now the next category is eating needs. What does your child need to eat? So this is mostly targeted towards babies because they need a lot more things like bottles or formula, or if you're breastfeeding, you might need a pump or any other supplies. So write down all of those things, but it's also important to keep in mind for your toddlers that they might want a certain sippy cup or maybe some snacks, just anything that you think that they might need to be comfortable in the eating category while you're away on your trip. Up next, we have clothing needs. What clothes does your child need for this trip? I try to keep the packing list pretty basic and just write things like 4 tops, 4 pants, 4 socks, whatever style of clothing I need for that trip. And then this is also a place where I brainstorm what I might need for the weather. So do I need bathing suits and sandals, or do I need hats, gloves, scarves? All of that stuff I try to brainstorm on this list. Also on the note of clothing, I think it's important to note that we were fortunate enough to be staying with friends in the middle of our trip, almost at the exact halfway point, so we were able to do laundry, and we really only needed to pack stuff for 4 to 5 days worth of activities, and then we were able to wash our clothes and have enough to get through the rest of the trip. So by being able to do laundry, you can pack less, and that kind of helps you with space saving as well. And the last category is entertainment. What are you going to need to entertain your child while you're on this trip? This could be things like tablets or books for older kids, or something like teething toys, or just little fidget toys for babies. Whatever you think your child is going to need to be entertained, write that down in this category. So those are the 4 major categories that I think through when I'm beginning to pack for a trip. So I hope that all of this helps you, and that you can kind of use some of these tips to make the packing process a little bit less stressful. Hopefully you won't be quite as stressed as I was on this trip. I think I'm still recovering from the stress, even though we had a great trip, we had everything we needed, it totally was fine, but I really worked myself up about it. And I hope that by seeing how we pack and seeing just some of the ways that I try to think about packing, I hope all of that helps you. So similar to planning activities for your trip, I'm sure that there's something that I forgot to mention or that I haven't even covered yet that you might want me to go into more detail about. If you're feeling that way, please leave a comment below about what you want to see more about for packing, and I will do my best to address it in the comments or in a future video. If you learned something in today's video, or you want to stay tuned for more travel tips, make sure you subscribe to our channel and hit the notification button so that you can get notified when we post new videos. And you can also head over to Instagram and follow us at @Explore. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time.